On today's show, the NBA draft lottery was absolutely wild on Monday, but fortunately for the Hawks, it went pretty well in Atlanta. We'll get into all of what transpired, what it says about the next 6 weeks, and more. All this coming up right now.
You are Locked On Hawks, your daily Atlanta Hawks podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello, friends. Welcome to episode 1973 of the Locked On Hawks podcast. I am your host, Rowland, coming to you on a Monday evening into Tuesday here in mid-May. And today's podcast is brought to you by the folks at FanDuel Sportsbook. Right now, if you're a new customer, get $200 in bonus bets. Your first $5 bet wins at FanDuel. The place to go is FanDuel.com to get started. I also want to encourage you at the top of the show, as I always do, to make sure first listen each and every day here at Locked On Hawks. Check us out and subscribe to this podcast anywhere you find your podcasts. And be sure to tell your friends and family about the show. You can find us on Apple, Spotify, YouTube, etc. And we appreciate you being here as always. It was a busy night in the NBA. It was a crazy night in the NBA when it comes to the NBA draft lottery. I do want to lead with the Hawks. It's a Hawks podcast. And the biggest takeaway from the Hawks perspective is that the Hawks basically got the result that they wanted and I would say mostly expected on Monday. So basically the Hawks entered this night with a 96% plus chance to get the pick from Sacramento Kings. It's been the long discussed. I've been talking about the Kings pick for a long time now, almost 3 full years since the trade happened that involved this pick. But it was top 12 protected coming into the year. Coming into the night, it was 96% or more, and a 93% chance, roughly, to be exactly number 13 overall at the end of the lottery. And that's exactly what happened in this spot. So it was expected that the Hawks didn't get lucky to get there, but it's what actually happened. They were at least avoided being unlucky in this spot. What that means is the Hawks now have 2 picks in the top 22 of the draft in about 6.5 weeks, basically at the end of June. It's number 13 overall and number 22 overall. Basically, coming into the year, the best possible pick they could have gotten from Sacramento was 13 overall. So that worked out swimmingly for Atlanta. You couldn't have drawn it up any better than this. It was top 12 protected. It broke perfectly. Now, that guarantees nothing, of course. But it's just nice to have 2 first-round picks and one of them be in the lottery, granted at the end of the lottery, but there is a small price to pay in that they do cost money. There's salary cap holds involved of more than $8 million for those 2 picks. But you definitely take that trade-off if you are the Hawks to come into play, of course, with team building stuff and luxury tax and salary cap, all that stuff. It all matters. But in the end, you go back to the Kevin Huerter trade, which happened again almost 3 calendar years ago. I think it was exactly July 1st of 2022. And a lot of that deal and the value of that deal rested almost exactly on whether the Hawks got a first-round pick from the Kings and also how high of a first-round pick that they got from the Kings. And while this does not actually matter in the grand scheme, this deal happened 3 years ago. It happened, whatever. If you go back and kind of evaluate that deal now, it looks a lot better with number 13 overall coming back to Atlanta than it would have with a pick in the 20s or not conveying at all. Because there was a decent chance if the Hawks got unlucky tonight, or if the Kings had just lost a few more games or whatever, it was kind of on the knife's edge. I won't recount all of it, but in the last 6 weeks, that pick varied wildly. The Hawks had to get some good fortune at the end of the season from Sacramento to get that pick. And yeah, it's not going to be Cooper Flag. Obviously, it's not guaranteeing anything. But to get that kind of asset, for lack of a better term, that kind of pick and a way to add to the roster, add to the depth and the talent of the organization is a pretty big win for Atlanta. So big picture, that's kind of the takeaway for me. You get that pick in a strong position is very, very important. And if you're new to the podcast, we'll spend the next 6 weeks talking about players and situations and scenarios and guys I like, guys I don't like. And having this, basically these 2 picks are close enough together but also further enough apart where they kind of overlap to some degree about maybe a couple players that could be involved in both spots. But there is a large swath of players that are going to be available and reasonable for the Hawks to kind of evaluate and investigate and all that stuff. If you listened to the show last night, I talked about this a lot on that show. Some of the pre-lottery mock drafts that were out there, casting a wide net on this thing. And yes, the Hawks are still at this moment on Monday evening without a president of basketball operations. That will dictate a lot about what actually happens here for the Hawks. But big picture, 25, 30 players are probably going to be somewhat involved here for the Hawks, but they do have 2 chances now to add to their roster and add to the young core that they're already trying to build. And obviously, that's a very, very good thing for the organization. I won't go through the entire board here on this Hawks podcast, but a few listeners already asked this question. So let's just do it a little bit here now. And I knew it was coming. As soon as the Hawks had 2 picks, the natural inclination for many listeners, Hawks fans, viewers, this is not a criticism, by the way, just a very natural thing. Okay, if we trade these 2 picks, how high can we get? That's a very natural thing. And I promise you, I got questions from John, from Ben. I think I got like 7 or 8 of this exact same question in the first 30 minutes after the lottery. And again, it's very natural. So I'll probably go through this a little bit more as to what I think about it later on in the cycle. Generally speaking, I am not as eager to trade up in the draft as many people are. And the math is kind of on my side there historically. But also, if you hit the right thing, it can be the right thing to do. So I'm not saying you never do it, but that's my general viewpoint. But I did some quick digging here with some comparable situations. If you were to just offer 13 and 22, which is not exactly, there's no rule that says you have to just offer that. But that was a scenario like, okay, package these 2 picks together. How high can you get? It's impossible to know without intel right now. My educated guess, again, right now on lottery night, no intel, is that maybe you can get to like 8, 9, something like that. If you just offer 13 and 22, I'd be surprised if it was higher than that. Maybe it's 7 right now is the Pelicans. Perhaps they wanted to take 2 swings at it. They might consider moving down. Brooklyn's got a lot of picks. They're number 8 overall. Anyway, that's kind of in a vacuum. Some history here. In 2013, pick 14 and pick 21 were traded together. That's almost exactly the same as what the Hawks are offering, and that got them to number 9 overall. In 2014, number 16 and number 19 went together for number 11 overall. That's not exactly the same, but somewhat in the realm. In 2016, number 13, number 28, which is lower than what the Hawks have, and a couple of like other smaller things went for number 8 overall. So roughly the same value calculus. And in 2017, number 15 and number 20 went for number 10 overall, which is, again, roughly where the Hawks are overall. So basically, if you look at the history in the last decade or so, all of these comparable moves would take you to like 9-ish, maybe 10, etc. I don't know if the Hawks want to do that, by the way. We don't know, and we probably can't know in that until we know who the front office is going to be. But that's the area. So, yeah, if a player, pick your favorite player in this range without getting into too many names like your Common Malawak or Con Knepel or whichever player that it is that you're dreaming about right now. If you want to get that guy, they're going to have to fall to at least 7 at the very, very, very least, and probably even further than that. So, broadly speaking, I would guess that's probably not likely to happen, but it certainly is possible. And because I was asked about that so frequently in the last hour or two, I want to at least address that right off the bat here. It's possible, it's popular, but you can't get to like 5. Like you have to throw in a lot more stuff to get even higher than that. And in this class, generally speaking, my thought is there's number 1, and we'll talk about him in a second with Cooper Flagg. Number 2 with Dylan Harper, and then it's kind of a pretty decent drop off. And the gap for me between 3, 4, 5 even, and like what you can get at 13 is not probably big enough for me to be super eager to trade the world to move up too much. But we'll get into all that more, I promise you. But broadly speaking, again, one more time here, it's a big win for the Hawks. It was expected coming into the night, but if you go back 2 months or so, nothing was guaranteed. There was a lot of mixed scenarios where the Hawks would have only had 1 pick in this draft, could have been even lower. Go back to the tiebreaker night of the draft lottery before that, the Lakers actually, quote unquote, won a 4-way tiebreaker to get to 22 overall. The Hawks could have been picking at 14 and 25 instead of 13 and 22. So this stuff all kind of broke the Hawks' way in the last month or so. And in the meantime, that's only a small thing. You got to make the picks and improve the roster, but a good night for the Hawks on that front. All right, more to come on the show, including my reaction to the top of the draft. And it was a crazy lottery, plus a mailbag question, some mock draft updates, and more. And it's coming up right now after this word from our partners. Today's show is brought to you by Hungry Root, and everyone in my house is always something going on, honestly. I call that busy season, and it's pretty much always that way. I don't have a lot of time to go grocery shopping or to cook healthy meals in my house, and that's why I happen to use Hungry Root. Hungry Root is like having your own personal shopper and nutritionist wrapped into one. They take care of grocery shopping and meal planning, offering personalized recommendations based on how your tastes are, what your health goals are, etc. And I love Hunger tailors my orders based on what I actually like or don't like. Honestly, it gets smarter each and every time that I use it. They have high quality, nutritious food. And because of that, you actually stick your gut friendly, high protein diet, for instance, without spending hours of planning and time and investment. It's much easier and time efficient with Hunger Root. The meals come together quite fast as well. 15 minutes or less to prepare them gives you more time for whatever you actually want to have more time for, whether it's working out or your hobbies or spend time with family, etc. Perhaps even working if you want to be like a podcaster, for instance. Take advantage of this exclusive offer now and get 40% off your first box plus a free item in every box for life. Go to hungerroot.com/lockedonnba and use code LOCKEDONNBA when you get there. That is code LOCKEDONNBA at hungerroot.com/lockedonnba, 40% off and a lifetime free item. Today's show is brought to you by Monarch Money. We've all done this before, I'm sure, but at times in the past, I look at my bank account and actually just wonder where all the money went. And between dining out and online shopping, entertainment, etc., it's easy to lose track sometimes of your money, but that's where Monarch Money comes in to help you. And Monarch Money is your personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control of your finances. It's not just a budgeting app. It's instead a complete financial command center. Track all of your accounts, your investments, and your spending in one place. You actually could just stop managing your money and start building wealth instead. When I started using Monarch Money, I actually realized how much money I was spending on food all the time, for instance. Just one example, but now I budget smarter and save more instead of juggling multiple apps. You can use Monarch to actually check your finances, check your spending, and even plan your long-term goals all in one place. If you want to manage your money in conjunction with your partner, it can be smoother than ever at Monarch Money as well. You can track shared accounts, personal accounts, set your goals, and stay on the same page without any of the stress. Take control of your finances right now with Monarch Money and use code LOCKEDONNBA at monarchmoney.com for half off your first year with Monarch Money. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONNBA, 50% off your first year. All right, and I wouldn't normally do this, but it's a little bit interesting and I would say crazy enough where I feel the need to talk about it a little bit. The top of this lottery was absolutely wild in every way. Even going into the commercial break, which if you follow the lottery for a while, that top four is always like post-commercial. And the four teams going into the top four, Charlotte was supposed to be there, but that was Philadelphia, San Antonio, and Dallas. So it was already crazy then. And then Charlotte, which is the one team that had a high chance to win this thing, comes in fourth. And it's like, oh, this is going to be pretty crazy. And in the end, the Mavs win the lottery. And honestly, that's the biggest story of the night, other than maybe the fact that Jason Tatum got hurt in pretty unfortunate fashion. Hopefully it wasn't as bad as it looked. That did not look good. I'm recording this late night Monday, so hopefully it's gotten better since then. But that looked bad for Boston and bad for Tatum, and you hate to see that. So that was unfortunate. But other than that, the big story was Cooper Flagg, of course, probably going to Dallas. You don't always want to say probably till it's done, but almost certainly going to Dallas. And look, the reactions were swift. I was, I would say, more annoyed than I would almost ever be by a result that I don't have any like investment in. I don't care about Dallas. I don't care about San Antonio. I don't care about any of these teams, like beyond just being someone who covers the league and enjoys basketball. I thought Dallas getting rewarded is just kind of unfortunate because they have botched a lot of things. I think Nico Harrison had one of the worst processes you've ever seen with the Luka trade. Even if you don't like Luka, and I know Hawks fans don't like Luka, a lot of them, that's totally fine. I'm not saying anything about that. It was the process that was really the most like offensive to people around the league. Like they didn't even try to figure out what the best deal was. It was a terrible process. And suddenly you wake up 3 months later and they win the lottery and a potential like game-changing prospect, Cooper Flagg. That's pretty tough to swallow if you are a neutral observer. That was frustrating. But every year, like there's always teams in every lottery that like I think don't deserve it. Maybe it's a weird way to frame that, but like don't deserve to win it. Dallas this year would be one of those teams. I would also say New Orleans, having won the lottery twice already with Anthony Davis and Zion, and like those guys were game-changing prospects. To win the lottery twice and squander it, basically, like fail to build anything that was actually really worth it. Also, they had Chris Paul, they ran him out of town. All those things, like they didn't really earn it either. People were saying this about Utah because Utah tanked so brazenly this year. I get that. They actually got unlucky. They fell to 5. Philadelphia this year, like, did they really deserve to win the lottery? It's kind of tough. Like, they did get really hurt, and that wasn't like their fault. But like that team winning the lottery would have been kind of weird. I just want to see anything but Dallas. It was tough. Anyway, that's crazy more than anything else. So I'll stop about that now. But I'll just say, like, people, I get why it's being said. It's not rigged. I'm pretty confident in that. I it's convenient to say. And look, honestly, the situation looks kind of bad for everybody involved with the league. If you're a casual observer and you see what all happened there and suddenly Dallas wins the lottery, it's like kind of a bad look. Unavoidable. Like have friends that were in the lottery room. Like there's 14 media members that cover the actual drawing that's behind the scenes. You have to leave your phone somewhere else. Like they've seen the process. It's not rigged unless there's a really elaborate job. I should say, like, it'd be very surprising if it was rigged. It's kind of hard to do that in front of that many people, but it's a bad look. It's unlucky for the league, I think, in some respects. But look, it is what it is. That was crazy. Dallas wins, and there's a whole discussion to be had. Like Kyrie's out for a while with the injury. AD doesn't want to play center, but guess what, AD? You're playing center in Dallas. I don't think that you are going to have Cooper play center. So all those interesting subplots, but they could be pretty good as soon as Kyrie comes back. Storyline there. The biggest thing, other than that, as the Spurs getting number 2 overall, is actually fascinating from a league perspective. Perhaps a trade down team, perhaps a trade out team, perhaps a Giannis team, all these things, because in my opinion, and in the opinions of a lot of people, not everyone, but most people, I would say, Dylan Harper is the number 2 player in this class, and he's a big point guard from Rutgers. The Spurs just traded a bunch of stuff for De'Aaron Fox, a fringe star point guard. And they also have Stephon Castle, who they think is incredible, rookie of the year. And by the way, Stephon Castle famously in the draft process wants to play point guard, have the ball in his hands. So you have Fox and Castle already. They can't really draft Dylan Harper without doing something else. That'd be a very odd thing to do while also keeping Fox and Castle. So do they trade that pick? Fascinating. No idea. The Sixers are in win now mode at number 3 overall. Morey has already said on the record they want to keep the pick. It's too early to really know that, but they could that could be a trade team to try to get something else, try to win in the short term. Charlotte is 4, Utah is 5, Washington is 6. Those are the rebuilding teams are later down the board, and then the Pelicans are at 7, Nets, Raptors, Rockets at 10 could be a trade team because they're not exactly in slow building mode either, and then the Blazers, Bulls, and then the Hawks at 13. By the way, if you are someone that cares about this, I'm of the mind, I've said this before, that the picks that the Hawks owe to San Antonio are kind of a sunk cost. You can't worry about that right now. That those picks they're just gone. But that pick did not jump up. It became the 14th pick this year, which isn't ideal, obviously. The first DeJounte trade was a very, very bad trade. That was an overpay. It didn't work out very well for the Hawks. We all understand that. But it wasn't a top 5 pick. So that's a little bit of a maybe solace for Hawks fans. It was only the 14th pick. It's behind the Hawks, and that's out the door at this point in time. Anyway, just an absolutely crazy top of the lottery. The Mavs getting the number 1 pick at a 1.8% chance of happening. This top 4, I haven't seen the number yet. I bet you the chances of this top 4 happening were infinitesimal. Like just one of those things, man. A crazy night and lots of reactions to sift through. And like it's frustrating. It's weird. It's got all the conspiracy theories that are going to be out there. But in the end, Cooper Flagg probably going to Dallas, and that'll be very, very interesting. And by the way, as someone who covers an Eastern Conference team, it would be really interesting, as someone who covers the league in general, like put the Hawks aside for a second, if just any of these top guys who are like clearly the number 1 player in their class, and when I say that, I mean Wemby, Flagg, Zion, AD, pick your guy. None of these guys ever go to the Eastern Conference. It's unbelievable. Zion, Pelicans, Wemby, Spurs, Flagg, Mavs, like AD, Pelicans back in, like all of these like clear number 1 overall guys, just for whatever reason end up in the West, and there's always this imbalance. There's already this imbalance between the East and the West for a long time now. About the West is just better and deeper, and like you keep adding to it. It's just kind of unlucky in some respects for the league, but there you have it. All right, quickly here before we move on to something else. Some post lottery mock draft updates. I won't go through all of this stuff now. It's still too early on this, but right now, Jonathan Givony and Jeremy Woo of ESPN have the Hawks taking Jake Richardson at 13 of Michigan State and Thomas Sorber of Georgetown, number 22. Sam Vecini of The Athletic has Nolan Traore at 13 and Cedric Coward, a very interesting prospect, off the radar guy from Washington State, going to transfer to Duke if he stays out of the draft, but I think he's going to stay in at this point in time. High upside player at 22 overall. And then John Wasserman of Bleacher Report has Colin Murray Boyles at 13 from South Carolina to the Hawks, and Danny Wolf at 22. Those are the kind of the 3 most mainstream mock drafts that have come out in the last couple of hours since the lottery actually was drawn. I have some notes on these guys, like with measurements that I'll say for later on, but a lot of the combine measurements started to leak out today. the combine is happening simultaneously. The first scrimmages that are publicly viewable are not till Wednesday, but a lot of the measurements happened yesterday and today. So we'll probably do a little bit of segment on this later in the week about guys who measured interestingly. For example, just one here, Thomas Sorber, who's actually been projected to the Hawks a few times now. I think by the Ringer had him as well. And then again, ESPN had this great freshman year at Georgetown, but a big fan of his all year. He's a center. He's not undersized terribly, but he isn't the traditional 7-footer that every Hawks fan seems to want right now. But Sorber measured him with a 7'6" wingspan, despite being about 6'9.5" without shoes. Probably 6'10.5", 6'11" with shoes. So not a small guy, but not a huge guy either. But a 7'6" wingspan is pretty massive for a guy of his height. That made a lot of news today, a lot of waves making around the rounds there about Sorber's wingspan, but also only like a 9'1" standing reach, which isn't bad for a center, but it's like slightly below average. It's like what Yves Missi had last year, for instance. So kind of an odd body type, but he's big and bulky and strong. I like Sorber a lot. But we'll get into that much more later on. Just one example, but there were guys who measured well. Sorber was one of those. There were guys who measured poorly. Richardson, by the way, Michigan State, who I mentioned in this same discussion from ESPN's mock draft at 13, measured 6'1.5" without shoes for a non-point guard. That's a tough measurement for him. We'll get into a lot of this stuff later on, but mock draft season is definitely now in full bloom. And I won't do like updates all the time, but every once in a while, just worth checking in on that stuff. And by the way, as things get closer to the draft, mock draft become more and more intel based. What I mean by that is right now, everybody's mostly guessing. You might have a little bit of intel, but you're trying to make logical fits. I've done mock drafts for a long time, logical fits and whatever. As you get closer and closer, you start to actually hear intel from teams, what they actually want to do. And that kind of increases the accuracy of a mock draft perhaps. So in a month from now, you'll know a lot more, and the mock drafts will matter a lot more, I would say, than they do right now. But right now, just a good opportunity to kind of take stock of some guys in the range for the Hawks. And as I said before, the range is very, very big, in my opinion, for the Hawks. And we'll find out more in about 6.5 weeks. All right, more to come on the podcast today. But first, a word from our partners on the show. Today's just brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook. The NBA playoffs are in full swing, and every night delivers highlight-worthy performances, major momentum shifts, and can't-miss moments. Whether it's a game-winning shot or a breakout player, there's never been a better time to get on the action with FanDuel Sportsbook. And to make it easy to stay in the game with FanDuel, both before tip-off and live, they have player props, performance trends, and same-game parlays, and fans have more ways than ever to play smart and also win big with FanDuel. That's especially true during the playoffs, but it's also true every single day of the year. They have offerings across the sports betting space from over-unders, point spreads, money lines, player props, game props, future bets, live betting, and same-game parlays, among others. And they have every sport and every league you can possibly think of as well at FanDuel. That's, of course, headlined by the NBA, which we cover all the time on this podcast, plus college sports, NFL, MLB, NHL, UFC. They have golf, they have tennis, they have soccer, boxing, and everything in between at FanDuel. And if you're new to the FanDuel Sportsbook right now, it's the perfect time. Sign up right now, and you can head to FanDuel.com and place your first $5 bet at FanDuel. If that first bet wins, you get $200 in bonus bets. That's right. $5 bet. Just place that bet. If you win it, $200 in bonus bets at FanDuel. Make every moment more with FanDuel, official sports partner of the NBA. All right, two more quick things here before we get out of here on this Monday evening into Tuesday. And again, plenty more to come. So go ahead and subscribe to this podcast. We'll be covering the draft, free agency, trade stuff all the way through June, July, August, etc. But one thing of note here is kind of semi-reporting from me. The Hawks have kind of gone back and forth in recent years on whether they actually publicly announce their pre-draft workouts. They never used to do this at all when I first started covering the team years and years ago. And they started doing it a lot more a few years ago under Travis Schlenk, into the Landry era, etc. They were pretty open about this for a while. And then last year, they kind of stopped doing that midstream. I was told by someone that would know today that the Hawks are not planning to announce their workouts this year. Not the biggest deal in the world, obviously. If anything, these workouts are almost probably overreactionary to the public because they assume that every guy that comes in is like on the Hawks radar, just to a probably bigger degree than they actually are. But we'll be relying on some reporting from myself and others, obviously, about who comes into town around the Hawks. Also, when they announce workouts, they also have media availabilities for the players that came into town. That's the one big negative for people like me, is not being able to talk to these guys and prospects in that setting. But in the meantime, you will not probably see as much of like the announcement of when guys are coming into town than you have at times in the past around the Hawks. All right, that was the last thing on the draft. One more mailbag question that's kind of newsy, but also not newsy at the same time. And bear with me, I will explain what that means in a second. A question from Tim. Did you see that Fisher and Stein mentioned the Magic and Rockets as trade rumor teams with Trey? I thought trade stuff wasn't happening anymore, but something that was on Hoops Hype. All right, so thanks for the question, Tim. I definitely appreciate that. I'm not kidding about that. Thank you for the questions, and please send them in all the time. I don't always do like mailbag calls, but the mailbag is always open. Twitter, Blue Sky, Patreon, email, which is lockedonhawks@gmail.com. Send them in. I will answer a bunch during the summer. But basically, this question refers to something that Mark Stein and Jake Fisher of the Stein Line Substack wrote on Sunday that I already kind of read before recording on Sunday night's podcast. They even talked about something they actually wrote in that piece about increasing agency buzz around the front office search. But anyway, I will not read the entire paragraph that Tim's referring to here. That'd be bad podcasting. But if you read it closely, it was pretty obviously just like secondhand speculation and not actual reporting of interest or rumors about Trae Young. Keep that in mind. Now, the section begins with Stein and Fisher saying that a talent evaluator they spoke with, quote, suggests it would be wise to test Atlanta's resolve, end quote, about not trading Trae Young, which basically means that someone is speculating that the Rockets or the Magic should try to convince the Hawks to move Trae Young. That's pretty natural. Like that, it makes sense. Like Houston, Orlando could have really used Trae Young. They're two of the teams in the league that like very obviously need a primary initiator on offense, which Trae Young, of course, is. He would be transformational for those teams. They're both on defense. He would help their offense, all those things. But this is just someone speculating about that, not reporting on it at all. And then Stein and Fisher ended the section about this by saying, quote, such thoughts qualify as just one exec's landscape projections, end quote. So long story short, this is not a rumor. This is not like reporting even. It's just like speculation. And they put it in there. I get it. And this is not picking on Tim at all. I appreciate the question a lot. It was on Hoops Hype. I went and found it there. I occasionally will pull that up just to make sure I don't miss anything. Hoops Hype is a decades long aggregation service that kind of helps to cull stuff together that is rumor based and intel based and slot based, all those things. But people ask me about this. I do understand why someone's asking about this, but it's just one of those things if you actually read the original text together and not the aggregation, just the actual text, and carefully kind of go through it, what they're actually writing. Like I referenced this before, but Jake Fisher, who's been on this podcast before, reported a few weeks ago that like kind of pointed to the Hawks being more likely to keep Trae Young. And I've heard the same thing. But even then, Jake never said they're definitely keeping Trae Young. And neither did I. Like it points that way, but there's uncertainty with this new front office structure, all those things. And this is not a rumor. Basically, that's the long story short of this. Not a rumor, not even close to a rumor at this point in time. This is an executive smartly pointing out, honestly, in my opinion, that the Magic and Rockets should call the Hawks on Trae Young. And honestly, they should. Trae would make those things better. But the Hawks don't have to play ball with them at all. The Hawks should keep Trae Young, in my opinion, unless they're bowled over by a trade that I don't want to see coming. But anyway, that's a non-rumor, but it's kind of one of those things that kind of made its way into the atmosphere. So I wanted to answer the question on the podcast, talk about that a little bit on the show, but mostly a draft-based episode. And again, we'll get into a lot of the measurement stuff, more deep dives on players when it comes to the guys who are linked to the Hawks. In the next 6 weeks, we'll have guests on. I have hopefully one as soon as Wednesday. Well, stay tuned. Please subscribe to the podcast. I will be here throughout the season. And by the season, I mean the summer season, but also the entire season. And every month, every week of the year, we have podcast content on this feed. So subscribe on Apple, on Spotify, on YouTube, and like this video as you're watching it as well. Follow us as a show on X/Twitter at Locked On Hawks. Follow me there at BT Rowland. Follow me on Blue Sky if you want to at BT Rowland. I'm also doing some non-podcast content about the Hawks at patreon.com/BT Rowland. All right, everybody. I appreciate you listening to the show. Hopefully you enjoyed this crazy lottery night, which is, again, a good one for the Hawks. We have much more to get to later on this week, and we'll see you all next time.